Welcome back to another episode of Choose Africa podcast. This is the podcast that tells you everything you need to know to hire from the continent. And today's episode is a solo episode, which I haven't done in a while. So I'm happy to be here and just be sharing some of my thoughts about why we need to stop talking about social impact in Africa, especially when it comes to outsourcing. So I'm sure if you've heard me before or follow me on LinkedIn, this is going to come to you as a surprise, but I'm telling you, we need to stop saying that we're hiring from Africa because of the social impact it's creating. And today I'm going to tell you the 7 reasons why it doesn't actually make sense to say that. Now, this is an episode for anyone who wants to hire from the African continent, or perhaps you're presenting this idea to your CEO or your sales director, or potentially maybe you've already hired from the continent and it kind of feels weird to talk about the social impact that you're creating with your employee and you're not quite sure why it feels weird to be saying that. I will tell you why in just a second. Now, to start this off, I want to tell you a few things. So today is October 10th, 2024 that I'm recording this. And in just 5 days, CRDLE is going to find out if we won the Outsourcing Impact Award, which is brought on by Outsource Accelerator. It's like a massive award if you're in the outsourcing space. And we were already acknowledged as one of the finalists for one of the companies in outsourcing making the biggest social impact, which is huge. Last year we won silver. This year I'm really hoping to win gold, but either way, I'm very proud of the social impact we're making. And I'm very proud of being a part of an industry, outsourcing, that actually is one of the biggest forces for good, is what I would like to say. And the reason why I talk so heavily about why outsourcing to Africa or why hiring teams in Africa makes such a big social impact is for these 2 reasons. And then once I share these 2 reasons, I'm going to tell you why we should stop also talking about these reasons. So one of the reasons why, just other than just being so proud of the social impact we're creating at CRDLE, is I hope to talk about social impact so that funders get involved. So if you know my story, I spent 7 months and 9 days backpacking across Africa by myself. And then I spent 8 years living in Ethiopia. And I have a background in social work. I have my undergrad as well as my master's in social work. So much of my time on the continent, especially when I was traveling and living in Ethiopia, I checked out nonprofits, charities. I checked out anything that was doing good. And what I found was unfortunately extremely sad. So many of the charities that we think are doing good aren't doing good. A lot of them are illegally operating. Some of them are causing harm, and some of them are just a big waste of money. Now, this is everything from small nonprofits that maybe your grandma is donating to, all the way up to US aid money, right? So there's just a lot of money going to the continent that's doing no good. And what's great right now in this day and age is that funders are getting smarter, and even organizations like USAID are starting to realize that Africans need digital jobs, and outsourcing does that. And so I'm hoping that when we talk about the social impact of outsourcing and hiring from the continent, these big organizations as well as small ones come on board and say, hey, we want to help African professionals get digital jobs. Or, hey, CRDLE or other outsourcing company, how can we help you create more jobs on the continent? Right now, I am starting to see some small traction, but unfortunately, the funding is still wildly disappointing. I'm just going to be honest. It's not been anything helpful. So I hope that as CRDLE talks about how outsourcing is so good, I hope that we get to be a leader and share what would actually make a big difference, because some funding could go a long way if it's spent in the right way. Now, the second reason why I do talk about social impact when it comes to hiring from the continent is because I hope more socially conscious people and organizations, I hope that will inspire them to hire from the continent. So, for example, there are 3,208 B Corps in the United States. If you're not familiar with B Corp, it's a certification that companies get showing that they're making a good impact, that they're good for the environment. And these are the kind of, like, I would say, socially conscious entrepreneurs who really care about the impact they're making. So imagine if every B Corp who recognized that hiring from the continent created a great social impact hired one person. Overnight, we'd create over 3,000 new jobs on the continent. That's a crazy amount of jobs. Now, if you look at, let's say, faith-based individuals, there's over 400,000 churches in the US. Imagine if every church hired just one person from the African continent to help them with marketing or YouTube editing or admin assistance, it would create so many jobs. It would create a better social impact than probably the impact a lot of them are doing. That's kind of the truth. So the reason why I talk about social impact is because I hope that we can get better funding and the right people involved, because it would be life-changing. But now let's switch gears a little bit and talk about why talking about the social impact in Africa is overused. Okay. So point number one is that because so many of us, especially in the US, view African countries in terms of charities, mission trips, nonprofits, aid. I mean, I could go on and on. We don't see it as a place to hire from. So when you think about, let's say, the Philippines, you automatically think of a virtual assistant. But when you think of a country like Ethiopia, maybe you think of the famine that happened in the 80s before I was even born. Or maybe you think about the mission trips that you did in Kenya. You know, we tend to associate it with charity, and our very thinking of that is actually what prevents jobs from happening on the continent, which then actually causes more damage than good. So number one reason is that because we don't view it as a place of business, we're actually hurting it and we're actually creating less jobs. So that's one of the first reasons why it has to go. And on that note, because we think of African countries in terms of charity, we also don't view them as a great place to travel when, honestly speaking, African countries are some of the best tourist destinations in the world. And the majority of African countries are statistically safer than the United States. But we don't know that because we think of it in terms of mission trips and not in terms of vacations and the best tourist places. So that's number one. Now, point number two is I've been in business doing Cradle for coming up on 3 years. No, 2.5 years or so. And one thing I have seen is that business owners, even the most socially conscious business owner, does not hire from the continent for social impact alone. It has to create an ROI for their business. Right. And that makes sense. If you have a cold caller, and even if you want to create a job for them, and even if you understand the social impact, but they're not making their dials, they're not setting appointments, at a certain time, you're going to terminate that job because it's business. If you have a virtual assistant who is not capable of doing the job, you don't care if she's, someone who needs that job. You also care about the fact that it's business and you have to get your work done. So what I've learned is that while we love talking about the social impact, it's the cherry on top. But business owners, especially of bigger companies, they are making the decision to hire from Africa truly based on the business ROI. And that's actually a great thing. Now, number three is African professionals don't want charity. In fact, I'm going to go out on a limb and say most people don't want charity. Most people don't want to, be unable to afford a pair of shoes for their kids. No, they want to buy it themselves. People don't want to get donated clothes. No, they'd rather go and pick out nice new clothes that are their style. People don't want a shoebox at Christmas. They want a paycheck every 2 weeks. So while charity is great for certain times and limited periods of time when it's needed, people aren't asking for handouts. Now, I'm on LinkedIn every single day, and every single day I get candidates from across the African continent reaching out. Do they ask me for a charity or a donation or a handout? No, nobody's actually ever asked me that. Instead, what they ask me for is a job or the chance to interview or the chance to apply. And that's what African professionals, let alone the whole continent, wants, is they don't want charity. They want the ability to work, to have a good career, to get paid an ethical wage that they deserve, that can cover their house and their school and all the things that they want to do. And so people want to work and they don't want handouts. Point number four is that when we talk about the impact of hiring from the continent, we ignore the very reasons why we should hire from there. So let's talk about the fact that while, yes, I, of course, love the social impact. Again, I have a social work background. There's some super smart ROI behind why you should be hiring from the African continent. It's not just to do good. It's actually literally the most up and coming outsourcing destinations in the world. So places like Philippines and India have been an outsourcing powerhouse for decades, but they're slowly actually getting tapped out. In fact, it's getting harder and harder to hire from there. And many companies in the Philippines in particular are actually reaching out to CRDLE and other African BPO companies to white label because they don't have enough people that they can hire that are trained and skilled and qualified. And so there's so many reasons why we should be hiring from Africa in terms of there's really good education. So for decades, there's been great education poured out into the continent. So now you have these amazing college graduates who are educated, who are skilled, who have good English, who have American accents, who work really hard. If you, for example, are trying to hire from the Philippines or India or another built up outsourcing company, as a small business owner, you're going to struggle to get the best talent. And that's because companies like Google and Microsoft and large companies are already there. And so you're competing against Google, right? Like your odds aren't good. But when you are hiring from the African continent, there's not enough large companies there. And the ones that are there pay really bad. And so you as a small business owner get the top talent because the countries are still untapped in their outsourcing potential. So when we talk about social impact to the continent, we ignore the business reasons that actually make it really smart. And then within the continent, every African country is very different. So when large companies come in, for a while, a lot of them are choosing Ethiopia in terms of the volume of people. So when I was in Ethiopia, I was part of the initial launch of the Ethiopian Outsourcing Association. So one of my duties was to research why would people hire from Ethiopia or build large teams in Ethiopia. And it was simply because there's 110 plus million people. So large companies who want to build like a 500 or 1,000 person call center could do that so easily in Ethiopia, right? So when we look at all the reasons to hire from the continent or from a specific country in the continent, there's just so many smart business ROI decisions that make it just an obvious choice for any forward-thinking business leader. Now, number 5, when we talk about social impact in Africa and hiring from the continent for social impact, we are discrediting the work that the African professionals are actually doing. So at CRDLE, all of our team members are essentially working US shift, unless they're working for one of our Australian clients or European clients, but most of them work 9 to 5 EST. Some of them do Central Time. Some of them are doing Pacific Time. So not only are they working 8 hours a day, showing up, using their knowledge and skills to build up your team, but often they're doing a lot of these, I would say, entry-level tasks that are really tedious. So think of a cold caller calling 200 people a day on average. I don't know about you, but I do not want to do cold calling, let alone I do not want to call 200 people a day. So if we are not acknowledging, first of all, the hard work and the work that they're doing the work that we don't want to do. I guarantee you that your American sales team does not want to do cold calling. And that is the benefit of hiring from the continent, is you can find so many great cold callers. So to talk about the social impact and discredit the fact that they're actually doing really valuable work for you is just crazy, in my opinion. And that kind of brings me to the next number 6. And that is when we talk about social impact in the continent, we also discredit the fact that truly, I think that they're helping us more than we're helping them. And let me put that into perspective. So we have a new client and he is a professor at a really nice college. And his job is to retire from being a professor and be a full-time keynote speaker who travels the world giving great paid speeches. And he hired one of our virtual assistants to help him book these events. So she's working 20 hours a week to book him events. Since we're in the fall of 2024, she's booking events out in the spring. And if she can book enough events in the spring and summer, he is going to quit his job finally and pursue his new dream career. So in this, I would ask you, who is making the bigger social impact? You know, I would argue that our Ethiopian team member is giving more than she's even delivering. Somebody gets to launch his dream career because of the work one of our team members is doing. That's pretty cool. It looks like he's getting a massive impact from that. Now, another example is we have a med tech client who sells a device that is a natural pain reliever. So instead of using an opioid, which is, obviously over prescribed and has caused the opioid crisis, this technology that they have invented is more powerful, and yet it's still natural. So we have team members who are helping this company and getting their product and their mission out there, providing them with admin support, doing sales work. And what they're essentially doing is they are reducing the opioid crisis in America. They are making an impact in American lives by supporting this med tech client. Now, example number 3 is we have a fitness company. We actually work with quite a few fitness companies, but there's one company in particular, and we did an interview, and they asked the Ethiopian sales rep, why do you want to be part of this fitness company? And I always remember what she said because it made me laugh so hard. And she said, well, I heard that obesity is a problem in America, and I want to help Americans have a healthy weight. And I was like, wow, the world is changing when Ethiopians are trying to help Americans with their weight issues. But again, it's just showing you that the work that African professionals are doing who are working for outsourcing companies and working for US companies, they are helping American companies, American communities, individuals, large organizations. And it is a complete disservice to not recognize that their hard work is making a positive impact in the US. And I think the same goes for a lot of physical products too. So I hate pity marketing, and I see it a lot with African products. So for example, somebody will import coffee from Ethiopia and talk about the social impact of supporting smallholder farmers. Yes, it is great the smallholder farmers are getting paid more money. But I have to ask you, how do you do without coffee in the morning? If you're anything like me, probably not so good. I get a headache, I'm cranky, I'm a total mess. So I would 100% argue that Ethiopian farmers or other coffee farmers in emerging countries are helping me significantly more than I'm helping them. The same goes for vanilla and chocolate. Try making a chocolate chip cookie without any chocolate, which most of the cocoa comes from Africa, or vanilla, also most of it comes from African countries, and your cookie is not gonna taste. So again, it's not gonna taste good. So we are ignoring the contributions and the work that they're doing, and all of the work that they're doing is actually helping us. And so we should at least acknowledge that, in my opinion. And the last point is, if you have ever done an interview at Cradle, or if you've ever traveled to the continent, or if you've ever met probably any young person from the African continent, you're going to realize that on average, they're pretty cool people. And I would say my cool factor is upped 1,000,000% because of the team members we hire. I might not be super cool anymore, right? I'm mid-30s, I have 2 kids, I'm a total mom at this point. But our team members, let me tell you, they know all the TikTok dances. They are on Instagram. They know how to make reels. They know YouTube. They are sometimes a DJ on the weekends. They know all the true crime podcasts. They watch all the reality shows. They can dance. They can sing. They're super tech savvy. They do so many things that I'm just in all of them. They're so creative and smart and talented and skilled and just super fun to be around, that I could never look at anybody we have hired and say yes, I'm making a social impact in your life. No, I would be so embarrassed. If anything, they are working so crazy hard for their clients. They have great personalities, great skill, and they're just a joy to be around. And it's more of just a fun business where we can connect these really cool professionals to businesses in the US for just a win-win. And so that's how I look at it. So the point of all this is to say, yes, outsourcing, awesome impact, right? And I will continue to talk about it because I want the word to get out there to the right funders and to the right people who can hire. But at the end of the day, we don't hire or do business out of charity or out of pity. We do it because it creates a smart business ROI. And if you are looking for talented, skilled, hardworking people, there's no better place to look than these young college grads in African countries. So we need to stop diminishing their careers, their skills, their service by saying we're creating a social impact, when in many cases, they are making probably a bigger impact in our communities. And it's just like any other job. So last example I'm going to leave you with is I went into Target recently and I was looking at the basket selection. So the basket I immediately gravitated towards was made in Rwanda. I was like, so cool, perfect for me. First of all, I liked it. It was like a lot more natural. It was super cute. I had been walking downtown Pittsburgh and I saw it in like a really cool tech office. And that's kind of what made me want to get it. And then I looked at the tag and it said, like this basket is creating jobs for Rwandan artisans so that they can have like a decent way out of poverty in a dignified manner. And I was like, okay. And then I look at the other baskets that are made in the US or other parts of the world. Nothing about the social impact. And yet this Rwandan basket was even better. So why do we feel the need to always talk about African countries in terms of social impact and us helping them when in this situation they made the better basket, right? So the rule of thumb is always like, if you want to say this about a US product or a US company or a US employee, maybe we just shouldn't say it towards the African brand or the African professional. That's kind of just a good rule of thumb, right? So if you have an employee, and would you ever say like, I'm helping you so much by giving you a job and I'm creating a social impact for you? Probably not. You'd probably say you do a really great job and I'm, thankful that you're part of my team, right? So you should say the same to whoever you're hiring overseas as well, whether that's an African country or really any outsourcing destination. So that's just some food for thought. Let me know what you think. I am always on LinkedIn. You can send me a message there. If you liked this episode and want to learn more about hiring from the continent, please like and subscribe to this podcast. And leave a review. It's massive in terms of getting this message out, and it would be just so super helpful. So anyways, see you next time and look forward to hearing your thoughts on this episode.